The October morning in Midhaven began with the same gray sky that had hung over the city for the third day in a row. Richard Coleman stood at the window of his small kitchen, watching the few passers-by hurry along Maple Street, turning up the collars of their coats against the cold wind. In his hand, a cup of instant coffee was growing cold, the only thing he could afford after his modest savings ran out 3 months ago. 62 years of life, and what did he have? A house he had inherited from his parents, which he struggled to maintain on his small pension as a former insurance agent, electricity bills that grew heavier with each passing month, and the emptiness that had settled in the house after the death of his wife Martha 3 years ago. Rick finished his cold coffee and glanced at his reflection in the window. His gray hair was still neatly combed back, and there were wrinkles around his blue eyes, but he still looked quite presentable. At least better than many of his peers. He decided to take a walk downtown. There was nothing to do at home, and the TV was showing nothing but depressing news. Main Street in Midhaven was a typical picture of a dying American town. Half the stores were closed, with for rent signs hanging in the windows. The ones that were still open were Bob's Barbershop, an auto repair shop, a few antique stores, and the Sweet Memories Cafe. We're barely making ends meet. That was where Rick headed. Not because he could afford breakfast there, but because he wanted to be around people, to hear voices instead of the deathly silence of his home. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully as Rick entered. Behind the counter stood a young girl with chestnut hair tied back in a casual bun. She wore a white apron over a simple blue t-shirt. She looked up from the cash register and smiled. "Good morning. What would you like?" Rick was taken aback for a moment. The girl was very beautiful. Not the artificial beauty you see on TV, but natural, alive. She had large brown eyes, a little tired but kind. Her name tag said Ashley. "Just coffee, please," he said, approaching the counter. "Americano latte, cappuccino?" Ashley asked, already preparing a cup. "An Americano would be great." While the girl was making the coffee, Rick looked around the cafe. There were several tables, cozy red banquettes, and old photographs of Midhaven in its heyday in the 1950s on the walls. Frank Miller sat at a corner table reading the newspaper, while Mrs. Connolly and her friend discussed the latest town news at another table. "Here's your coffee," Ashley said, placing the cup on the counter. $3. Rick handed her a $5 bill, one of the last in his wallet. "Are you new in town?" Ashley asked, giving him his change. "I don't remember seeing you before." "I've lived here all my life," Rick laughed. "I just don't get downtown very often." "Richard Coleman, but my friends call me Rick." Ashley Morgan. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Coleman." "Just Rick, please." Ashley smiled, and Rick felt something stir in his chest, a feeling he hadn't felt in many years. When was the last time he had spoken to a beautiful young woman, not counting the usual pleasantries in stores and banks? "Have you been working here long?" he asked, not rushing to leave. 2 years. I went to a local college after high school, but it didn't work out. I had to find a job." A hint of sadness flashed in Ashley's voice, but she quickly hid it behind a professional smile. "I understand. These are tough times for young people." "What do you do, Rick?" Now Rick felt uncomfortable. What could he say? That he was living on a meager pension? That his only occupation was watching TV and reminiscing about better times? "Investments," he said, surprising himself. "I work with real estate and securities. You know, these days you have to make your money work for you." It wasn't exactly a lie. When he was younger, he did know a little about stocks and even had a small portfolio. However, he had sold everything long ago to pay for Martha's medical bills. Ashley's eyes lit up with new interest. "That must be very interesting. I've always wanted to understand how it works. My brother says that rich people know some secrets that they don't tell ordinary people." "Your brother is a wise man," Rick said, feeling the lie grow in his head. "There are certain strategies, but it takes time and patience." An elderly woman with a dog on a leash entered the cafe, and Ashley excused herself to serve her. Rick sat down at a free table by the window, slowly sipping his coffee and watching the girl. She moved with ease and grace, patient and polite with every customer, even when Mrs. Connolly counted her change for the third time. Pretty girl, isn't she? Rick turned around. Sitting at the next table was Mrs. Eleanor Hutchins, his neighbor. 78 years old, a widow. She lived alone in the house across the street from him. The woman was known in the neighborhood for her keen observations and penchant for gossip. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Hutchins. I didn't see you come in." "Ashley Morgan. Nice girl, hard worker. Too bad she got involved with that good-for-nothing Derek Parker. Although, I hear she dumped him recently." The old woman sipped her tea and studied Rick's face intently. "What are you doing here, Mr. Coleman? I don't remember seeing you in the cafe before." "Just felt like a good cup of coffee," Rick replied cautiously. Mrs. Hutchins clearly didn't believe him, but she didn't pursue the matter. When Ashley was free, Rick went to the counter for a second cup of coffee. "Mrs. Hutchins says you recently broke up with your boyfriend," he said, trying to sound sympathetic rather than nosy. Ashley frowned. "Derek, yes, we broke up a month ago. He thought the world owed him everything. He didn't want to work. He just dreamed of easy money." She sighed. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have brought it up. You didn't want to hear about my problems. On the contrary, sometimes it's good to get things off your chest. And you know what? You did the right thing. A man should be able to provide for his woman." Ashley looked at him intently. "Are you married, Rick?" "I was. My wife died 3 years ago. Cancer." It was true, and the memory made his throat tighten. "I'm so sorry," Ashley said sincerely. "That must be very hard." "It is, especially the first 2 years. It's a little easier now, but the house still feels empty." "Do you have any children?" "No, unfortunately, it didn't work out." Rick paused, then added, "What about you? Are you planning on having a family?" "Someday. But first I want to get on my feet, find some stability. You see, I grew up in a poor family. My dad left when I was 10, and my mom worked 2 jobs to feed me and my brother. I don't want my children to grow up with that kind of uncertainty." Rick nodded understandingly. "That's a wise approach. Financial stability is the foundation of a happy family." "Easy to say, hard to do." Ashley smiled sadly. "You can't get very far on a waitress's salary." "Have you thought about other options? Investments, for example?" "What would I invest in? I can barely afford rent and food." Rick sensed an opportunity to impress her. "You see, Ashley, you don't always need a lot of money to invest successfully. The main thing is to know the right strategies. I started with small amounts, for example, and now my portfolio is worth..." He paused, as if calculating. "About $2 million. Ashley's eyes widened. "Really? 2 million? It's the result of many years of work, of course. But yes, sometimes I can't believe it myself." Rick felt the lie intoxicating him. For the first time in years, he saw admiration in the eyes of a beautiful woman. "Wow, I thought there were no people like that in our town." "Oh, we are. We just don't advertise it. It's better not to stand out in small towns." The bell rang again, and a tall young man in work clothes entered the cafe. The oil stains on his t-shirt and his calloused hands gave him away as a mechanic. "Hi, Ash," he said, approaching the counter. "Hi, Tommy." Ashley turned to Rick. "This is my brother, Tommy. Tommy, meet Rick Coleman." Tommy looked Rick up and down and held out his hand. The handshake was firm, almost painful. "Tommy Morgan, nice to meet you." "Likewise," Rick replied, trying not to wince from the squeeze. "Rick's in investments," Ashley said proudly, as if they were old friends. "Yeah." Tommy didn't look impressed. "How's that going? I hear the market's been unstable lately." Rick sensed a trap in the question. For those who understand the market, any instability is an opportunity. The key is portfolio diversification and long-term planning." "I see." Tommy still looked at him suspiciously. "What area do you specialize in?" "Real estate mainly, plus technology stocks." Rick tried to sound confident, recalling bits and pieces of information from financial programs on TV. Tommy ordered a coffee to go and, after receiving his cup, looked closely at Rick once more. "See you at home, Ash. Mom said dinner's at 7. After he left, Ashley apologized. "Don't mind Tommy. He's always suspicious of new people, especially those who seem too good for our family. He cares about you, that's good. Sometimes too much." Ashley sighed. Rick looked at his watch. It was already 3 o'clock. I have to go, but you know what? I really enjoyed talking to you. Maybe you'd like to join me for dinner sometime? There's a nice Italian restaurant in the next town. Ashley was taken aback for a moment. I don't know. We hardly know each other. That's exactly why we should get to know each other better, Rick smiled. Nothing serious, just a nice evening in good company. Ashley hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but only if it's really just dinner. Of course, I'll pick you up tomorrow at 7, if you give me your address. Ashley wrote her address on a napkin. Here, but if anything changes, I understand. Goodbye, Ashley. As he left the cafe, Rick felt a rush of energy he hadn't felt in years. For the first time since his wife's death, he had something to look forward to. Yes, he had lied about his wealth, but what was the harm in that? He just wanted to make a good impression. He would take it from there. At home, he opened an old box of documents and found several references from his last job. Maybe if he approached it seriously, he could alter them a little. The internet was full of information about what successful investors' documents looked like. It was getting dark outside, but for the first time in 3 years, Rick didn't feel lonely. Tomorrow would be a new day, and Ashley would be part of it. Rick woke up on Friday morning with a feeling he hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, he had plans for the evening, and those plans included a beautiful young woman. Before he even got out of bed, he was already thinking about the details of his upcoming date. The problem was money. He had less than $400 in his bank account until his next pension check, and a nice dinner at an Italian restaurant in the next town would cost at least $150, plus gas, maybe flowers. Rick opened Martha's old jewelry box where he kept her engagement ring. It was a small diamond, but still worth something. No, he thought, pushing the box aside. Not that extreme. Instead, he drove to the bank. The loan officer, a young guy named Brad, had known him since Rick had decent savings. Mr. Coleman, long time no see. How can I help you? I need a small loan against my house, Rick said as confidently as he could. $5,000. Brad frowned as he looked at his computer. You see, Mr. Coleman, you already have a mortgage on your house, and considering your income... It's temporary, Rick interrupted. I have some investment opportunities that will cover the loan in a couple of months. I just need some liquidity. After half an hour of negotiations and signing a pile of documents, Rick left the bank with a check for $3,000. Not $5,000, but enough to get started. At a flower shop, he bought a bouquet of white roses. Ashley seemed like the kind of girl who would appreciate a classic. Then he drove to a mall in a neighboring town and bought a new shirt and tie. Nothing too expensive, but good quality. At home, he took a shower, shaved carefully, and got dressed. In the mirror, he saw a man who looked his age but respectable. If you didn't look too closely at the scuffs on his shoes and didn't know that his shirt was bought at an outlet store, at 7 in the evening, he parked near a small 2-story house on Oak Street. The paint on the fence was peeling in places, the lawn needed mowing, but the house looked well kept. Ashley appeared on the porch, and Rick's breath caught in his throat. She was wearing a simple black dress and low-heeled shoes. Her hair was loose, and light makeup accentuated her natural beauty. When she smiled at the flowers, Rick felt young again. God, they're beautiful. Thank you, Rick. You're welcome. You look stunning. He opened the door of his old but clean car for her. On the way to the restaurant, they chatted about the weather, the city, and mutual acquaintances. Ashley was an intelligent conversationalist, and Rick enjoyed her attention. The Bella Nota restaurant was located in a historic building in the center of Hillside, 40 minutes from Midhaven. Rick chose it because no one knew him there, and no one could accidentally expose his deception. The interior was decorated in a classic Italian style. Brick walls, candles on the tables, quiet jazz music. Wow, Ashley whispered, looking around. How beautiful. It must be very expensive. Don't worry about it, Rick said, feigning nonchalance. Tonight is my treat. The waiter, an elegant middle-aged man with an Italian accent, approached their table. Welcome to Bella Nota. Today's tasting menu includes scallops with risotto and veal with truffles. Rick quickly scanned the prices on the menu and swallowed. The tasting menu was $80 per person, plus wine. "Sounds wonderful," he said aloud. "Ashley, what would you like?" "To be honest, I'm not very knowledgeable about fine dining," she admitted. "Maybe something simple?" "Try the linguine with seafood," suggested the waiter. "It's our signature dish, not too complicated, but very tasty." Ashley nodded gratefully. Rick ordered a steak and a bottle of red wine, mentally calculating the cost. "Tell me about your job," Ashley asked when the waiter left. "Is it really that interesting? Investing?" Rick felt the familiar excitement of a liar. "It's like chess, only the stakes are real. You have to see the big picture several moves ahead and understand the psychology of the market." He leaned toward her across the table. "For example, right now I'm watching a technology company. Their stock is down 30% because of temporary problems. But I know that in 6 months, they're going to get a big government contract. And what do? I'm buying at a low price. When the news about the contract becomes public, the stock will go up 2, maybe 3 times. Ashley's eyes lit up. "And how much can you make?" "On this deal? About $500,000, Rick lied, amazed at his own audacity. $500,000? For one deal? When you have capital, money works for itself. Of course, there are risks, but with the right approach." The wine was brought, and Rick paused with relief. Ashley sipped the wine, clearly unaccustomed to such high-quality alcohol. "Tell me about yourself," he asked, trying to change the subject. "How did you end up in Mid-Haven?" "I was born and raised here. After school, I wanted to leave to study, so I enrolled in a college in Columbus to study journalism. But in my second year, my mother fell ill, and I had to come back. She worked in a fabric store, and we barely had enough money for her treatment. And now? She's healthy now, thank God. She works at the same store and lives with us. Tommy helps out too, but he has his own life, a girlfriend." Ashley smiled sadly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck here forever. Why don't you try again? College isn't going anywhere." "For what? I can barely make ends meet. Tommy says I'm dreaming of the impossible, that I need to be realistic." Rick reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "It's never too late to start over. And you know what? Sometimes all a person needs is a little support at the right moment." Ashley looked at their joined hands, then into his eyes. "You're very kind, Rick, and wise. Your wife must have been very happy." The pain of memories stabbed at her heart. "Martha was special. We met when I was 25. She was a primary school teacher. She said I was too serious for my age, that I needed to laugh more." "And you?" "I fell in love at first sight. We were together for 40 years. When she got sick, I sold almost everything we had just to give her a chance. The best doctors, experimental treatment at a clinic in Chicago." Rick's voice faltered. It was the truth, and that made it even more painful. "I'm so sorry," Ashley said quietly. But she knew she was loved. That's worth a lot. Their food arrived, and they ate while continuing to talk. Ashley told him about her dreams of becoming a journalist, the books she loved to read, and the trips she wanted to take. Rick listened, captivated by her enthusiasm and youth. "Do you travel?" she asked. "I used to with Martha. Europe, Asia. We had a favorite hotel in Tuscany, a little place in the hills. We spent 2 weeks there every summer." Another lie. He and Martha had been to Florida twice and Canada once, but Ashley was listening so intently that he wanted to be interesting to her. "It sounds like a fairy tale," she sighed. "Maybe someday I'll show you Tuscany," Rick said, surprised at his own boldness. Ashley blushed. "Rick, we've only known each other for a day. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to embarrass you. It's just been a long time since I've met someone so interesting." After dinner, when the waiter brought the bill, Rick felt his stomach tighten. $230, including tip. He smiled and handed over his credit card, praying that the transaction would go through. On the way back, Ashley was pensive. "What are you thinking about?" Rick asked. "About how unusual you are. You don't meet men in our town who talk about Tuscany and million-dollar deals." "Do you like that?" She paused. "Honestly, it scares me a little. I'm just a simple girl from a simple family. I don't know if I belong in that world." "Ashley, look at me." He stopped the car at her house and turned to her. "Money is just a tool. It doesn't make a person better or worse, and you're special, beautiful, smart, kind. Any man would be lucky to have you." She looked at him with wide eyes. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," she said quietly. "Will I see you again?" "Yes," she nodded. "I'd like that." Rick walked her to the door. On the porch, Ashley turned to him, stood on tiptoe, and kissed him lightly on the cheek. "Good night, Rick." At home, he couldn't fall asleep for a long time, replaying every minute of the evening in his head. For the first time in 3 years, he felt alive. Yes, he had lied about the money, but did that really matter? The important thing was that they had a connection, an understanding. He was awakened in the morning by the phone ringing, an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Coleman, this is Tommy Morgan, Ashley's brother. Could we meet? We need to talk." The voice was polite but cold. "Sure." "What's it about, if you don't mind?" "About your intentions toward my sister and your business. I have a few questions." Rick's throat went dry. "Okay. Where and when?" "Sweet Memories Cafe, 1 o'clock. Ashley's working, so she won't hear us." After Tommy hung up, Rick sat on his bed for a long time, thinking about the situation. His brother suspected something. He had to be careful, but not look nervous. The main thing was to stick to his story. At 1 o'clock, he arrived at the cafe. Tommy was already sitting at a corner table, away from the counter where Ashley was working. There was a folder with documents on the table. "Hi, Rick. Sit down." Rick sat down opposite him, trying to look relaxed. "What are these documents?" "What do you think?" Tommy opened the folder. "I'm a mechanic, but that doesn't mean I'm stupid. I checked you out on the internet last night." Rick's heart began to race, but he remained calm. "And what did you find?" "Richard Coleman, former insurance agent. Wife died 3 years ago. Lives alone in a house on Maple Street." Tommy looked at him intently. No mention of any investment activities. No company registrations. Nothing. "Tommy, I understand you're worried about your sister, but Ashley told me about your date. Expensive restaurant, talk of millions, plans to travel to Europe." Tommy leaned forward. "You know what I think? I think you're lying, and I want to know why." Rick felt sweat beading on his forehead. "Listen, I don't have to explain myself to you. Ashley is a grown woman. Ashley is a naive girl who's been dreaming of Prince Charming her whole life. And if you think you can take advantage of that—" "I'm not taking advantage of anyone," Rick snapped, and several diners turned to look. He lowered his voice. "I like your sister. I want to make her happy." "With what money?" "I checked, Mr. Coleman. You took out a loan from the bank yesterday, $3,000. Is that all you have?" Rick was stunned. How did Tommy find out about the loan? "I have a friend who works at the bank," Tommy explained, seeing his confusion. "It's a small town. Everyone knows everyone." "All right," Rick said quietly. "Yes, I'm not a millionaire. Yes, I live on my pension. But my feelings for Ashley are real." "And then what? When she finds out the truth? When she realizes that all your promises are lies?" Rick stood up from the table. "You know what, Tommy? Instead of suspecting everyone, maybe you should be happy for your sister. She's found a man who appreciates her, who's willing to take care of her." "Take care of her with what money? Loans?" "With love," Rick said, and left the cafe without looking back. But Tommy's words stuck in his head. What would happen when Ashley found out the truth? And she would find out sooner or later. If not from her brother, she would figure it out on her own. Maybe he should confess now before things went too far. That evening, Ashley called him. "Hi, Rick. Tommy said you two were together. Was he rude?" "No more than a caring brother should be," Rick replied diplomatically. "He's worried. After Derek, he doesn't trust any of my boyfriends." "Am I your boyfriend now?" Rick ventured. Ashley laughed. "We'll see. But I'd like to get to know you better. Maybe next time you could show me your house? I'll cook dinner." Rick froze. His house would reveal the whole truth at first glance. "Sure," he said, realizing he was digging himself into a deeper hole. "But I warn you, I'm not a very good host. The house has become more modest since my wife died. Don't worry, it's the company that counts." After his conversation with Ashley, Rick realized he had a week to prepare. A week to transform his modest home into the abode of a successful investor, or to find a way to avoid this date. For now, he went to bed, dreaming of Ashley's hazel eyes and trying not to think about her brother's suspicious look. Rick spent a sleepless night thinking about the problem of Ashley's upcoming visit. His house on Maple Street screamed poverty from every corner. The worn-out furniture that he and Martha had bought 20 years ago, the old TV, the cheap curtains, the refrigerator that made suspicious noises. How could he bring the girl he had told about his $2 million briefcase there? In the morning, he drove to the mall, armed with furniture catalogs and the last of his credit. At HomeMax, a saleswoman with the enthusiasm of an intern showed him leather couches and oak tables. "This living room set is $4,900, she said, stroking the armrest of an elegant sofa. "But we have an installment plan." "Anything simpler?" Rick asked, mentally calculating the balance in his account. "This set is $2,000. It's faux leather, but it looks pretty solid." Rick nodded. Plus a new TV, a few paintings for the walls, new curtains. By the end of the day, his credit card was maxed out and his house was filled with boxes of furniture. He spent the next 3 days transforming his home. He had to move the old furniture into the garage and assemble the new pieces himself. His back ached mercilessly, but the result was worth the effort. The living room now looked respectable, almost wealthy. The details remained a problem. The bookshelves were empty. He and Martha had a small collection of romance novels and detective stories, but a successful investor had to read something serious. He bought several books on economics and finance at a secondhand bookstore and placed them in prominent places. In the kitchen, he replaced the old dishes with new ones from IKEA and bought several bottles of good wine. He hung new curtains in the bedroom and covered the bed with an expensive bedspread. The house was transformed, but his bank account was completely empty. On Wednesday evening, Ashley called. "Hi, Rick, how are the preparations for our dinner going?" "Everything's ready," he lied, glancing at the bedside table assembly instructions scattered across the floor. "I can't wait." "Me too, I decided to make lasagna. It's my signature dish." "Well, one of two," she laughed. "Sounds great. Maybe I'll get some wine?" "You have that wine cellar you told me about, right?" Rick froze. When had he mentioned a wine cellar? Sure, just thought it would be nice to have some variety, you know. No, I'd love to try something from your collection." After the conversation, Rick frantically tried to remember what else he had told Ashley about his house. The wine cellar, the home office, the library god. What had he gotten himself into? On Thursday morning, Mrs. Hutchins came to his house. The old woman stood on the porch with a pie in her hands and curiosity in her eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Coleman. I decided to bring you some apple pie. And I wanted to see what kind of rearranging you've been doing. The trucks have been coming and going all week." "Thanks for the pie, Mrs. Hutchins. I just decided to redecorate." "I see." She peered over his shoulder into the hallway where a new leather sofa stood. "That kind of redecorating must be expensive, right?" "Don't worry about it," Rick said hastily, closing the door. "I'm not worried. Just wondering how a pensioner can afford furniture that costs thousands of dollars." Rick felt a chill run down his spine. "Excuse me, Mrs. Hutchins. I have things to do." Of course. By the way, I saw you and young Morgan at the restaurant. Pretty girl. Not your age, though, don't you think?" Rick closed the door without answering. The old woman was clearly suspicious. It was impossible to hide anything in a small town, especially from such observant neighbors. On Friday evening, an hour before Ashley arrived, Rick stood in the middle of his transformed living room and tried to calm down. The house looked good, not like a millionaire's mansion, but like the home of a man of moderate means. Maybe that would be enough? The doorbell made him jump. Ashley stood in the doorway with a large bag of groceries and a dazzling smile. "Hi! Ready for a culinary experiment?" "Always," Rick replied, helping her take off her coat. Ashley looked around and he held his breath. "Wow, how stylish! I love the minimalist look, and what a beautiful sofa!" "Thanks, I recently redecorated." She walked into the living room looking at the books on the shelves. Principles of investing, market psychology. You really take your work seriously. You have to keep learning. The markets change every day. In the kitchen, Ashley was busy at work. She moved confidently and quickly, clearly skilled at cooking. Rick watched her, admiring the grace of her movements. "Tell me about your workday," she asked, cutting vegetables. "What's a day in the life of a successful investor?" Rick felt the familiar tension of a liar. "I usually get up early and check the Asian markets. They close when it's morning here. Then I analyze the news and study company reports. The main trading starts at 9:30. "Where do you work? At home?" "Mostly at home, yes. I have an office upstairs." He nodded toward the stairs. "Several monitors, a direct line to the stock exchange." "Can I see it?" Rick's heart sank. "Sure, but it's a mess right now. We had new equipment installed yesterday." "No problem, I won't judge," Ashley laughed. "Better after dinner, okay?" While the lasagna was cooking, they sat in the living room with glasses of wine. Ashley talked about her job at the cafe, her regular customers, and her plans. "You know, after our conversation about college, I started thinking maybe I should give it another try. I found an online journalism program that I can do through distance learning." "That's a great idea," Rick said, genuinely excited. "Really? Tommy says it's a waste of time and money." "Tommy, how does he feel about our relationship?" Ashley sighed. "He's skeptical. He thinks I'm too naive, that men are using me. After Derek, he doesn't trust anyone." "What do you think?" "I think a grown woman is capable of figuring out her own feelings." She looked at him seriously. "Rick, I like you. You're smart, kind, interesting, and I feel like you're not playing games with me." The words hit harder than a slap. Rick looked away. "Ashley." "What?" "Nothing, just thanks." Dinner was wonderful. Ashley's lasagna was really delicious, and the conversation was light and pleasant. Rick almost forgot about his problems as he enjoyed the company of a beautiful, intelligent woman in his home. After dinner, Ashley asked to see the office. "To be honest, it's really messy in there," Rick said as he climbed the stairs. "The tech guys were working on the system yesterday." He opened the door to a small room that used to be Martha's sewing room. There was an old desk with a laptop and a stack of papers on it. No special equipment, no monitors. Ashley looked inside and frowned. "Where are the trading terminals?" "You mentioned several monitors." "They were taken down for a system upgrade," Rick lied quickly. "They'll be installed next week." "I see." Ashley still looked puzzled. "Where's the wine cellar?" "The wine cellar? You told me about your wine collection." Rick realized he had backed himself into a corner. "Oh, that's in the basement. But there's a moisture problem there right now, so we had to move the bottles to another location." "Rick, are you okay? You look nervous." "Everything's fine. Just tired. It's been a tough week at the markets." They went downstairs and Ashley started to get ready. "Thanks for a wonderful evening," she said, kissing him on the cheek. "Dinner was great." "Thank you. You're a wonderful cook." At the door, Ashley turned around. "Rick, can I ask you a personal question?" "Sure." "Are you really as rich as you say you are?" The question hit him like a bolt of lightning. Rick felt the ground slip away beneath his feet. "Why do you ask?" "I don't know. Something doesn't add up. The house is beautiful, but it doesn't look like a millionaire's house. The office looks strange. And Tommy says..." "What does Tommy say?" "That he checked you out on the internet. That he couldn't find any trace of your business." Rick was silent, not knowing what to say. "Listen," Ashley said softly. "I don't care how much money you have. I mean it. That's not why I like you, but if there's something between us, I want honesty." "Ashley, just think about it, okay? I have to go. My mom gets worried if I'm late." After she left, Rick sat on the new couch for a long time, staring at the remains of his dinner. The walls of lies were crumbling. Ashley suspects Tommy knows the truth. Even the neighbor is sniffing around. Maybe it's time to come clean? Tell Ashley the truth and hope her feelings for him are real? But what if she leaves? What if, upon learning of his poverty, she realized that he was just a pathetic old man clinging to the illusion of youth? Rick got up and went to the window. Across the street, the lights were on in Mrs. Hutchins' house. The old woman was probably watching his house, noting every detail. Tomorrow he would go to the bank and try to get more money. Maybe he could pawn his car. He had to hold out a little longer, find a way to convince Ashley that he was financially stable. Then he would see. The phone rang, pulling him out of his thoughts. Ashley's number appeared on the screen. "Hi," he said, trying to sound calm. "Rick, I need to tell you something." Ashley's voice sounded determined. "Tomorrow I'm going to Columbus to file for reinstatement at college." "That's wonderful. I'm proud of you." "Thanks. And I've been thinking about what I said today, about honesty." Rick held his breath. "And I want you to know that I don't care if you're poor. If you have problems, I understand, but if you're lying to me, that's different." "Ashley, don't answer right now, just think about it. I'll be back the day after tomorrow evening. We'll talk then, okay?" "Okay. Good night, Rick." "Good night." Rick slowly put down the phone. He had 2 days to decide the fate of their relationship, 2 days to choose between truth and lies. Outside the window, Mrs. Hutchins turned off the lights, but for some reason, Rick was sure she was still watching. On Sunday morning, he drove to the bank, hoping to take out an additional loan against his car. But the bank was closed for the weekend. He would have to wait until Monday. On Monday morning, Manager Brad greeted him with a sour expression. "Mr. Coleman, we have a problem. Your last loan is 3 days past due." "I know. I'll make the payment soon." "And now you want more money? Against the car that's 15 years old?" Brad shook his head. "I'm sorry, but we can't approve a new loan." Rick left the bank feeling depressed. He had less than $100 in his account and his credit cards were maxed out. And Ashley was coming home that evening. At home, he found an envelope with no return address in the mailbox. Inside was a photo of him and Ashley leaving Bellanata restaurant. On the back, in beautiful handwriting, was written, "Do you think she'll love you when she finds out the truth? Some secrets are better kept, $5,000, and the photo will disappear." At 6:30 in the evening, Rick sat by the window, waiting for Ashley to return. At 7 o'clock, Tommy's old Toyota pulled up outside the house. Ashley got out of the car with a small bag. Rick opened the door before she even knocked. "Hi, how was your trip?" "Great!" Ashley hugged him. "I got accepted. I can start school next semester. That's amazing. Congratulations." "Thanks. Now." She looked at him seriously. "We need to talk." They went into the living room. Ashley sat down on the sofa, and Rick sat down in the armchair opposite her. "Rick, I've been thinking a lot about us over the last 2 days. And what have you come to?" "I want honesty, complete honesty." She leaned forward. "Are you rich or not?" Rick swallowed. There was a long pause. "No," he said quietly. "I'm not rich." $2 million? That's a lie. Investments? That's a lie. Ashley leaned back against the sofa as if she had been hit. My God, Tommy was right. "Ashley, let me explain." "Explain what? That you've been lying to me since day one? That you let me make plans for the future based on a lie?" Rick stood up from the chair and walked over to her. "I wanted to impress you. I was afraid you wouldn't like the real me." "And who is the real you?" "A lonely retiree who lives on $1,000 a month, who fell in love with a beautiful young woman and was afraid of losing her." Ashley stood up, moving away from him. $1,000? What about this house? The new furniture? The expensive dinners at restaurants? Loans. I borrowed the money to... Rick stopped, realizing how pathetic it sounded. "To do what? To buy my love? No, to give you what you deserve. A beautiful life, stability. With borrowed money?" Ashley's voice grew colder. "And then what? When the loans run out?" Rick was silent. "You know what, Rick? I thought you were special. I thought I'd found a man who could give me what I'd always wanted. Stability, the chance to study, to travel. Ashley, I love you." "You love me?" She turned to him sharply. "You don't even know me. All our conversations were based on lies." The words hurt more than a slap. "I'm not like that." "Yes, you are. You're worse than all the others. At least Derek didn't pretend to be a millionaire." Rick felt anger boiling up inside him. "You know what, Ashley? Yes, I lied about the money, but my feelings for you are real. What about yours?" You fell in love with my wallet, not me. What did you say? What I think. If I had told you from the start that I was living on my pension, you wouldn't have even looked at me. Gold digger. Ashley turned pale with rage. How dare you? I dare because it's true. All your talk about dreams and college, you were looking for a sugar daddy, not a man. Something changed in Ashley's face. Cold rage replaced the pain. You're a pathetic old man, she said in a quiet, dangerous voice. You think you can blame me for what you did? Buying a woman with lies about wealth? Ashley. Shut up! She shouted. You used me! You let me fall in love with a fantasy! And now you dare call me a gold digger? Ashley grabbed a heavy glass vase from the table, one of Rick's new purchases. Ashley, calm down! Calm down? After what you did to me? Her voice was hysterical. You stole months of my life. You made me believe in a fairy tale. She swung the vase at him. Rick instinctively raised his arms to protect himself. Wait, let's talk. Talk? Ashley laughed, but it was a terrible laugh. About what? About how you spent your last money to deceive me? About how you planned to marry me while hiding the fact that you'd soon be living on the street? I didn't plan anything. Liar! You thought that if you married me, I'd support you. A young wife who would work while her old husband sat at home? Rick backed away toward the fireplace. That's not true. It is, and you know what? You underestimated me. Ashley slowly walked toward him, clutching the vase in her hands. I'm not the naive fool you took me for. I grew up poor. I've seen men promise women the world and then disappear. Ashley, I'm not going anywhere. Of course you're not, because you have nowhere to go. She took another step. You're old, sick, and poor, and you thought a young fool would save you. I love you. Don't you dare! Ashley roared. Don't you dare talk about love! You're incapable of loving anyone but yourself! Rick stumbled over the coffee table and fell onto the sofa. Please! You know what pisses me off the most? Ashley stood over him, her eyes burning with rage. It's not that you lied. It's that you thought I was stupid enough not to notice. I didn't think that. You did! A stupid waitress from a poor family. Easy prey for a smart old man with fairy tales about millions. Ashley raised the vase above her head. Now you're going to pay for underestimating me. Ashley, no! The vase came crashing down on Rick's head. He cried out, blood streaming down his face. Ashley struck again, then again. That's for lying! She screamed with each blow. That's for humiliating me! This is for thinking I was cheap! Rick tried to defend himself, but his strength was leaving him. Blood filled his eyes, and his head was ringing. Stop! He croaked. But Ashley was relentless, blow after blow. The heavy vase shattered, but she continued to strike him with the shards. You wanted to buy me! She screamed hysterically. You thought I was for sale! Finally, Rick stopped moving. Ashley stood over his body, breathing heavily, her hands covered in blood. Silence. The realization of what had happened came gradually. Ashley knelt down next to Rick's body and checked his pulse. Nothing. My God, she whispered. What have I done? Richard Coleman was dead. Ashley sat on the floor next to the body for a long time, unable to believe what had happened. Then she slowly got up and looked at her bloodied hands. She had to act. Should she call the police? Make up a story about self-defense? But who would believe that she had killed an elderly man in self-defense? Ashley took out her phone and dialed a number. Tommy? It's me. I need help. Right away. Tommy arrived 20 minutes later. When he entered the house, he froze when he saw Rick's body in a pool of blood. Oh my God, Ash, what have you done? He called me a gold digger, Ashley said quietly, sitting on the couch. After all his lies, he had the nerve to accuse me. Tommy quickly surveyed the scene. A broken vase, blood on the floor and furniture, scratches on his sister's arms. We need to call the police. What am I going to tell them? The truth, that he attacked you and you defended yourself. Who's going to believe me? I'm young and strong, he's an old man. Tommy thought for a moment. Say he was drunk and aggressive. Does he have alcohol at home? Whiskey, an almost empty bottle. Good. Pour the rest on his clothes. Say he got drunk, Started hitting you, you pushed him away, he fell and hit his head. What about the vase? Say he threw it at you, missed, and it broke. Ashley nodded. Tommy helped her stage a fall and they poured whiskey on Rick's body. Now call the police. Say you came to his house and he was already dead. I was scared, so I called you. What if they find my fingerprints on the vase? You've been here before. You could have touched it. At 11:47 p.m., Ashley called emergency services. Paramedics arrived first, followed by patrol police. Detective Sarah Jenkins arrived half an hour later. Jenkins was 45 years old, with 20 years on the force, specializing in domestic crimes. She was tall and thin, with piercing gray eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. Miss Morgan, I'm Detective Jenkins. Tell me what happened. Ashley, sitting on the porch, told her story in a trembling voice. I came to Rick's house around 8 in the evening. We had a fight recently, and I wanted to make up. The door was open. I went in and found him on the floor. I knew right away that he was dead. I was scared, so I called my brother. What was the argument about? Personal stuff. Our relationship. I see. Why did you come so late? I couldn't make up my mind. Pride, you know. Jenkins wrote it down in her notebook. Did you notice anything unusual? Signs of a break-in? Strange cars? No, nothing. While the detective was talking to Ashley, forensic experts were working inside the house. They took photos, collected samples, and took measurements. Detective, a technician called her. Take a look at this. Jenkins entered the house. Rick's body was lying by the fireplace, surrounded by broken pieces of a vase. There was a lot of blood, more than would be expected from a normal fall. What do you think? She asked the medical examiner. Preliminary findings indicate multiple blunt force trauma to the head, at least 5 or 6 blows, definitely not a fall. Murder? Most likely. Jenkins returned to Ashley. Miss Morgan, I need to ask you a few more questions. At the station, preferably. Am I under arrest? Not yet. But your testimony is important to the investigation. The interrogation continued at the station until 3 in the morning. Ashley stuck to her story, but Jenkins noticed some inconsistencies. You said the door was open, but the neighbors say Mr. Coleman always locked his doors. Maybe he forgot. Or someone opened it from the inside. Who would he trust enough to let in late at night? Ashley remained silent. Tell me about your relationship with Mr. Coleman. We were seeing each other for a few weeks. Really? I don't know. Maybe. What did you fight about? Ashley hesitated. He lied to me about himself. He said he was rich, but he was broke. And you got angry? Of course. Nobody likes being lied to. Angry enough to go and confront him at 11 o'clock at night? I told you I wanted to make up. Jenkins let Ashley go home, but asked her not to leave town. Over the next few days, the investigation gained momentum. Jenkins interviewed Rick and Ashley's neighbors, colleagues, and acquaintances. Mrs. Hutchins proved to be a valuable witness. I saw her come to his place on Monday evening. About 40 minutes later, I heard screams, then silence. An hour later, her brother arrived. Are you sure about the time? Absolutely. The news was just starting on TV. At the cafe, Ashley's colleagues talked about her dreams of a rich husband. She always said she wouldn't repeat her mother's fate. She said she would only marry a wealthy man, said the waitress Cindy. Tommy tried to defend his sister during questioning. Ashley is not capable of murder. She is a kind, gentle girl. But you hired a detective to check on Mr. Coleman? Yes, I was concerned he was too good to be true. And what did you find out? That he was lying about the money. I warned Ashley, but she wouldn't listen. So your sister had a motive for rage? Tommy remained silent. Detective Victoria Stern confirmed that Ashley knew about Rick's financial problems. I told her the details on Monday night. She was shocked by the scale of the deception. How did she react? She said she needed time to think, but I saw the anger in her eyes. Bank records revealed Rick's desperate situation. $12,000 in loans, overdue payments, and his house was about to be repossessed. He was backed into a corner, Jenkins told the prosecutor, and she realized she'd been deceived and used. Enough for a motive? More than enough. A week later, forensic investigators found a crucial piece of evidence. Ashley's fingerprints were clearly visible on one of the vase shards. Blood analysis showed that she had beaten Rick while he was already lying on the floor. This was not self-defense, the expert concluded. This was murder in the heat of passion. On November 18th, Ashley Morgan was arrested on charges of second-degree murder. The trial began in February. The prosecutor painted a picture of a mercenary young woman who killed an old man in a rage because he couldn't support her. The defendant built a relationship solely for financial reasons. When the deception was revealed, she killed the victim in a fit of rage. The defense tried to portray Ashley as a victim of emotional abuse. My client was deceived by an elderly man who took advantage of her youth and naivety. The murder was committed in the heat of the moment. Mrs. Hutchins's testimony about the screams and the time frame, as well as the expert's conclusions about the nature of the injuries, were key. Ashley remained calm in court, but when the jury's verdict was read, she began to cry. Guilty of second-degree murder, the judge sentenced her to 15 years in prison. The court takes into account the defendant's youth and the circumstances of the case. But murder is murder. The use of violence is unacceptable, whatever the motives. Tommy visited his sister in prison every week. On his first visit, he brought photos of their childhood. "How are you?" he asked. "Fine. I'm studying law at the prison college." "Why?" "I want to understand how I got to this point." "Ash, you're not a monster. It's just the circumstances." "No, Tommy, I killed a man. Yes, he lied, but he didn't deserve to die. He used you, and I used him. I was looking for a rich husband, not love. Maybe we both got what we deserved." Tommy took her hand through the glass. "Don't say that. It's true. I fell in love with his money. He fell in love with my youth. When the illusion shattered, all that was left was anger." In May, Rick's house was sold at auction. The money went to pay off debts. Mrs. Hutchins bought a few things at the sale. Photos of Rick with his wife, old books. "I feel sorry for him," she told Detective Jenkins. "A lonely old man looking for love, and he found death." "Don't you feel sorry for the girl?" "I do, but it was her choice." Detective Jenkins closed the case in June. In her final report, she wrote, "The murder was motivated by deception and greed on both sides. The victim deceived the suspect about his financial situation, and the suspect used the victim to achieve financial stability. When the deception was revealed, the suspect killed the victim in a fit of rage." The case was covered in the local press under the headline "Deadly Lies: How Deception Led to Murder." The article ended with the words, "The story of Rick Coleman and Ashley Morgan is a tragedy of mutual exploitation. An elderly man sought youth with money he didn't have. A young woman sought stability in a man who couldn't give it to her. When the lies came crashing down, all that was left was violence. In Midhaven, no one talks about love anymore without mentioning this story."